I thought my marriage was dying quietly, until I found women's lubricant hidden under the passenger seat of my husband's car. My hand started shaking. 27 years together. 2 children. A lifetime of loyalty. Meanwhile, he was sneaking into motels with a younger woman while I waited at home like a fool. That night, I sat alone in the dark kitchen staring at a bottle of super glue. I should have walked away. I should have cried. I didn't. The next morning, my husband ended up screaming in a hospital emergency room. And what happened next, no one saw coming. Rain slammed against the garage door while Patricia searched Richard's SUV for a grocery bag he forgot. The overhead light flickered as her hand brushed against something under the passenger seat. A small purple tube. Women's lubricant. Already used. Patricia froze. No way. A sweet perfume lingered inside the car. Not hers. Upstairs, Richard laughed in the shower like nothing was wrong. Patricia tightened her grip around the tube until the plastic bent in her hand. Why is this in your car? The question hit hard. But another one hurt even more. Who was her husband sleeping with? A floorboard creaked behind her. Patricia quickly slipped the tube into her coat pocket just as Richard stepped into the garage, drying his wet hair with a towel. "Everything okay?" he asked casually. "Just looking for the grocery bag." Richard nodded, but his eyes never fully met hers. That small movement hit harder than shouting ever could. He walked past her too fast, reaching for the driver's door. A wave of sweet floral perfume drifted from inside the SUV again. Not Patricia's perfume. Her chest tightened. Richard forced a smile. "You coming inside?" Patricia stared at him in silence, her fingers still wrapped around the hidden tube. After Richard went back inside, Patricia stayed alone in the garage, unable to slow her breathing. The rain kept pounding the roof while her eyes drifted toward the old metal tool cabinet near the wall. Almost without thinking, she pulled it open. Screwdrivers. Tape. Batteries. Then she saw it. A small bottle of super glue. Her fingers stopped. The lubricant tube felt heavier inside her coat pocket now. Patricia picked up the glue slowly, staring at the label while anger burned deeper in her chest. "If you want to play dirty, Richard," she whispered. For the first time that night, revenge entered her mind. Patricia stood motionless beneath the flickering garage light, the bottle of super glue still clutched tightly in her hand. Outside, rainwater slid across the driveway, catching the red glow of Richard's taillights before disappearing into the dark. Upstairs, her husband moved around the house like an innocent man, unaware of what had already started breaking inside his wife. That night, Patricia had no idea one decision was about to destroy everything they had built together. And once the damage began, there would be no way to stop it. Patricia Coleman was 52 years old, the kind of woman who still believed marriage meant forever. She worked part-time at a small flower shop 3 days a week, but most of her life had been spent taking care of everyone else first. Her husband, her children, her home. Every morning started the same way. Coffee ready before Richard woke up, laundry folded neatly, dinner waiting on the table by 6. Friends used to tell her, "You spoil that man too much." Patricia would only smile. That's what wives do. She believed loyalty mattered. Commitment mattered. After 27 years together, she never imagined the man sleeping beside her could become a stranger. At first, Patricia tried to ignore the changes. Richard suddenly started going to the gym 4 nights a week, even though he used to complain about back pain after climbing the stairs. He bought fitted shirts, expensive cologne. One afternoon, she reached for his phone to check a recipe, and the password no longer worked. "When did you change it?" she asked lightly. Richard barely looked up. "A few weeks ago." Then came the long showers. 20 minutes. Sometimes 30. Humming to himself behind the bathroom door like a younger man in love. Patricia noticed everything. The new haircut. The extra mints in his car. the smile he hid while texting late at night. And one thought kept circling inside her mind. Who was a man almost 60 trying so hard to impress? Still, Patricia kept searching for excuses because the alternative hurt too much. Maybe Richard was simply afraid of getting old. Maybe the gym, the cologne, the late-night texting. All of it meant nothing. One evening, while cleaning the living room shelves, she picked up their old wedding photo. A thin layer of dust covered the frame. Patricia wiped it gently with her sleeve. In the picture, Richard held her waist tightly, smiling like she was the only woman in the world. He loved me, she whispered to herself. For a moment, she almost believed it again. But deep down, sadness had already begun settling quietly inside her chest. A week later, Patricia stopped pretending everything felt normal. Near midnight, while Richard poured himself another glass of wine in the kitchen, his phone suddenly lit up on the counter beside her. Just 3 words appeared on the screen. "I miss you." Patricia's chest tightened instantly. Before she could even process the message, Richard lunged forward and snatched the phone from her hand so hard that her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered across the floor. "Don't touch my phone," he snapped. The room went silent. Patricia stared at him in shock. In 27 years of marriage, Richard had never raised his voice at her like that before. His breathing turned uneven, his face pale. Then he looked away first. That was the moment something inside Patricia finally cracked. The next morning, she started watching everything her husband did. Weeks passed, but Patricia barely slept anymore. Some nights she lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of Richard's car pulling into the garage after midnight. Every excuse changed depending on the day. Work, dinner. Traffic was terrible. My phone died. The lies came too easily now. One evening, while hanging his jacket in the closet, Patricia caught a soft floral scent on the collar. Not the perfume she wore. Younger. Sweeter. Intimate. Her hand froze against the fabric. Richard walked into the bedroom a second later. "You okay?" he asked. Patricia forced a small smile. "Just tired." But inside, anger had already started spreading through her like poison. Richard no longer looked nervous when he lied. That hurt more than the affair itself. He thought she would keep believing him, keep cooking dinner, keep waiting at home like always. Patricia stared at him quietly while he loosened his tie in the mirror. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" she thought bitterly. And for the first time, she stopped fearing the answer. 3 nights later, Patricia heard Richard's phone vibrating inside the SUV, just after he went upstairs to shower. The sound kept buzzing through the quiet garage. Sharp. Urgent. She hesitated for a second before opening the passenger door and reaching beneath the seat for the phone. The screen lit up instantly in her hand. "Call me when she sleeps." Patricia stopped breathing. No name. Just the message. Water rushed through the pipes inside the house while Richard hummed casually upstairs, completely unaware. Patricia stared at the glowing screen as her chest turned cold. Suddenly, every late night, every lie, every hidden smile started connecting together. This wasn't suspicion anymore. Her husband was living a second life behind her back. As Patricia lowered the phone, something else caught her attention near the floor mat beneath the passenger seat. The same purple tube she had noticed before. This time she picked it up slowly. The lubricant was almost empty. A faint lipstick stain marked the cap, dark red under the garage light. Her stomach twisted. Then the smell hit her again. Sweet perfume mixed with sweat and leather seats. Intimate. Recent. "Oh my God," she whispered. Patricia turned the tube over in her trembling hand while heat rushed into her face. Another woman had been inside this car, sitting where Patricia once sat beside her husband, maybe laughing with him, touching him. Her fingers tightened harder and harder around the tube until the plastic bent inward with a soft crack. At that moment, humiliation hurt more than anger. Upstairs, water poured through the shower pipes while Richard sang softly to himself behind the bathroom door. Calm. Relaxed. Almost happy. The sound froze Patricia where she stood in the dark garage, the crushed tube still trapped in her hand. She couldn't understand it. How could he sound so peaceful after destroying her like this? Patricia listened to his voice echo through the house, and something inside her began changing. Not heartbreak anymore. Not confusion. Anger. Slow. Heavy. Burning deeper with every second. Were you smiling at her the same way you used to smile at me? She thought bitterly. For the first time, Patricia stopped wanting answers. She wanted him to hurt too. As the anger spread through her chest, old memories came rushing back one after another. Patricia had given up her full-time job when their first child was born because Richard said, "The kids need their mother at home." Years later, when his mother became sick, Patricia spent nearly every day caring for her. Feeding her, bathing her, sleeping beside hospital beds while Richard focused on work. And she never complained. While Richard built his career, Patricia built the life around him. She handled birthdays, bills, school meetings, holidays. Everything. She stood beside him when his business nearly failed. Encouraged him when he wanted to quit. "You're the reason I made it," he once told her. Now those words felt disgusting. Patricia stared at the wedding ring still resting on her finger, and a painful realization settled deep inside her. She had sacrificed her entire life for a man who no longer valued it. Patricia lowered herself onto the cold garage floor, her eyes drifting back toward the small bottle of super glue sitting inside the open tool cabinet. For a long moment, she simply stared at it while rainwater tapped softly outside. Then she picked it up. Her thumb pressed lightly against the bottle. A small drop spilled onto her fingers. Damn it! Patricia tried pulling her fingers apart, but the glue clung instantly to her skin. Tight. Unforgiving. She grabbed a rag nearby and forced them apart with a sharp breath. That was when her gaze slowly shifted toward the nearly empty lubricant tube beside her. The garage suddenly felt very quiet. Patricia's breathing slowed. "If this got inside the tube," she whispered. The thought shocked even her. But it didn't disappear. It stayed there, growing darker by the second. Later that night, Patricia sat alone in the dark kitchen with all the lights off except the one above the stove. Her chest hurt from holding everything in. Slowly, she walked to the bathroom mirror and looked at herself under the pale light. The wrinkles near her eyes suddenly seemed deeper. Her tired face. The gray strands hiding in her hair. Patricia swallowed hard. "She's younger," she whispered. Of course she was. Women like that wore tight dresses and laughed too loudly. They didn't spend years raising children or caring for sick relatives. They didn't wake up exhausted every morning wondering where time had gone. A tear rolled down Patricia's cheek before she could stop it. For the first time in years, she no longer felt like a wife. She felt old. Replaceable. And somewhere upstairs, the man she gave her life to slept peacefully beside her pain. By 2 a.m, Patricia still hadn't gone to bed. The digital clock on the kitchen microwave glowed faint blue in the darkness while rain whispered against the windows. She sat alone at the table without moving, one hand wrapped tightly around a cold cup of coffee she no longer wanted to drink. Upstairs, Richard slept peacefully. That made everything worse. Patricia could still hear his laughter from earlier. Still smell another woman's perfume inside his car. Every memory replayed inside her head like a punishment she couldn't escape. Her eyes drifted toward the garage door. Toward the hidden tube. Toward the bottle of superglue. A heavy silence settled over the house, but Patricia's mind wouldn't stop spinning. Anger mixed with humiliation until she could barely breathe through it anymore. Something dangerous was beginning to grow inside her that night. A few minutes later, Patricia stood inside the garage again. This time, her hands no longer shook. The bottle of superglue sat beside the purple tube under the harsh white light above the workbench. Slowly, She unscrewed the lubricant cap and squeezed part of it into an old paper towel. Her breathing stayed steady. Then she opened the glue. 1 drop. 2. 3. The thick liquid disappeared inside the tube almost instantly. Patricia pressed the sides carefully, mixing it little by little until it looked untouched from the outside. Calm. Precise. Almost surgical. She paused only once when footsteps creaked upstairs. But Richard never came down. Patricia grabbed a clean cloth and wiped every surface she had touched. The cap, the tube, the workbench, even the glue bottle itself. No fingerprints. No mess. When she finished, she stared at the tube for several long seconds. It looked completely normal. That was the terrifying part. Finally, Patricia walked back to Richard's SUV and slid the tube beneath the passenger seat exactly where she had found it. Same angle. Same position. Then she quietly closed the car door. No tears. No panic. Just a dangerous kind of calm settling over her face. The moment Patricia stepped back inside the house, the calm vanished completely. Her hands started shaking so badly she could barely lock the garage door. A sharp wave of panic climbed into her chest. She rushed into the downstairs bathroom and dropped to her knees beside the toilet. Then she got sick. Her whole body trembled violently as she gripped the sink afterward, staring at her pale reflection in the mirror. Water dripped from the faucet in slow, uneven taps. "What the hell did I just do?" she whispered. For one terrifying second, Patricia almost ran back outside to throw the tube away, to undo everything before it was too late. But then she pictured the lipstick stain again. The secret texts. Richard smiling at another woman. The anger returned instantly. Patricia closed her eyes, breathing hard, trapped somewhere between guilt and revenge. The next morning, Richard came downstairs looking strangely polished for a man supposedly heading to an ordinary client meeting. Fresh shave. Dark blue fitted shirt. Expensive watch. He even sprayed cologne in the hallway before grabbing his car keys. Patricia stood silently at the kitchen counter, fingers wrapped around her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles turned white. "You're up early," Richard said casually. "Couldn't sleep." He smiled like nothing between them had changed. Then just before walking out the door, Richard blew her a playful kiss. "Love you, honey." Something violent flashed through Patricia's mind so fast it scared her. For one horrifying second, she imagined driving a knife straight into his chest. But she only forced a smile. "You too." Richard walked toward the garage completely unaware of what was waiting for him beneath the passenger seat of his SUV. And Patricia could feel the explosion coming closer with every second. About 20 minutes after Richard left, Patricia opened the family location app on her phone with shaking hands. She stared at the small blue dot moving across town. Part of her still hoped he was actually heading to work. He wasn't. The dot slowed near the edge of the highway, then stopped in front of a small roadside motel Patricia had never noticed before. Her breathing caught instantly. "No." She kept watching. 10 minutes passed. 30. 1 hour. Richard never left. Patricia sat frozen at the kitchen table, while the location stayed locked in the same place for more than 2 hours. Every minute felt like another knife twisting deeper into her chest. Finally, she grabbed her purse and car keys so fast the chair nearly tipped over behind her. If Richard wanted to lie to her face, then she wanted to see the truth with her own eyes. And moments later, Patricia was driving straight toward the motel. Patricia parked across the street from the motel with her headlights off, her fingers locked around the steering wheel. Every part of her still prayed she was wrong. Then the motel room door opened. Richard stepped outside first. And behind him came a blonde woman young enough to be his daughter. Vanessa. She couldn't have been older than 32. Tight black dress. Long bare legs. Bright smile. Patricia felt sick instantly. But the worst part wasn't her age. It was Richard's face. He looked happy. Really happy. Vanessa laughed at something he whispered to her. Then Richard pulled her closer by the waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. A second later, he kissed the side of her neck slowly while she smiled against his chest. Patricia stopped breathing. That used to be her. Those hands. That smile. That tenderness. For a moment, the pain became so sharp she thought she might actually pass out inside the car. Her husband hadn't just cheated on her. He had replaced her. Patricia's hand shot toward the car door handle so fast her bracelet slammed against the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at her to run across the parking lot, drag Vanessa by the hair, and force Richard to look her in the eyes while everything burned down around him. But she stopped. Her fingers tightened around the handle until they hurt. Outside, Richard laughed again, his arms still wrapped around the younger woman's waist. Patricia could feel rage rising so violently inside her that her vision blurred for a second. "No," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Not yet." Slowly, she leaned back into her seat without taking her eyes off them, because suddenly humiliation wasn't enough anymore. Patricia wanted something worse. Patricia had barely made it halfway home when her phone suddenly rang through the silence of the car. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. "Hello, Mrs. Coleman?" a woman's voice asked quickly. "This is St. Vincent Medical Center. Your husband has been admitted to the emergency room." Patricia's grip tightened around the steering wheel. What happened? A short pause followed. "There was a private accident." The moment those words left the nurse's mouth, Patricia understood instantly. Heat rushed through her body so fast it nearly stole her breath. Her pulse exploded inside her ears. "Oh my God!" Images flashed through her mind all at once. The motel room, the lubricant tube, the super glue. Richard. Vanessa. The trap she had created. Patricia slammed her foot harder onto the gas pedal, while panic and adrenaline crashed violently together inside her chest. By the time Patricia reached the emergency room, chaos had already swallowed the entire floor. Nurses rushed past with metal trays while muffled shouting echoed behind the treatment doors. The moment she stepped inside, she heard Richard screaming, "Get it off! Jesus Christ!" Patricia froze near the hallway entrance. Richard lay twisted on the hospital bed, drenched in sweat, his face pale from pain while two doctors argued in urgent whispers beside him. One of them pulled off bloody gloves with visible frustration. "We need to separate the tissue carefully," the doctor muttered. "This is getting worse." Across the room, Vanessa sat trembling in a chair, mascara running down her cheeks. She looked terrified, humiliated, completely shattered. "Richard, I didn't know," she cried. Richard couldn't even answer. Another wave of pain bent his body forward with a broken groan. Then his eyes lifted and locked onto Patricia. For one long second, nobody moved. Vanessa slowly turned toward the older woman standing near the doorway. The wife. The real wife. Patricia didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. She simply stared at both of them with a face so cold it unsettled the entire room. That frightened Richard more than the pain itself, because deep down he suddenly understood. This wasn't an accident. And as Patricia watched the two people who destroyed her marriage fall apart in front of her, the first dark taste of satisfaction quietly entered her chest. Richard tried to sit up when Patricia stepped closer to the bed, but another stab of pain forced him back down with a groan. His eyes filled with panic. "Patty, listen to me." Patricia stopped beside him. For a second, the entire room held its breath. Then her hand slammed across his face. The crack echoed through the emergency room so sharply that even the nurses turned around. Vanessa gasped in shock. Richard froze, staring at his wife with disbelief burning across his reddened cheek. 27 years of loyalty, sacrifice, humiliation. All of it lived inside that single slap. "You embarrassed me for her?" Patricia said quietly, her voice shaking with fury. "Look at yourself now. Richard lowered his eyes for the first time since she arrived. And Patricia finally saw shame break through him. Patricia leaned closer to Richard's hospital bed until he could see every ounce of fury in her eyes. Vanessa stayed frozen in the corner, too afraid to speak. "You really thought you could betray me," Patricia whispered, "and walk away without consequences?" Richard's breathing turned uneven. "Patty, what are you saying?" She didn't answer immediately. That silence terrified him more than shouting ever could. Patricia only glanced down briefly at the pain twisting his body apart beneath the hospital sheets. Then she looked back into his eyes. Cold, steady, unreadable. And suddenly Richard remembered the lubricant tube inside his SUV. The way Patricia had stared at him the night before. The strange calm on her face that morning. Fear slowly replaced confusion. His lips parted slightly. "You knew." Patricia gave the smallest smile. But she still said nothing. The truth spread faster than Patricia expected. Vanessa wasn't some random woman Richard met at a bar. She worked in the marketing department at his company. 32 years old. Divorced. Hired less than 2 years earlier. According to Richard's own coworker, the affair had been going on for nearly 10 months. 10 months. Patricia felt sick hearing the number out loud. What made it worse was discovering how many people already suspected it. The late lunches, closed office doors, business trips that suddenly included Vanessa. Coworkers had talked about them in whispers while Patricia stayed home believing her husband was working overtime. They looked obsessed with each other, one employee quietly admitted. Patricia forced herself not to react. But humiliation burned through her entire body. People had watched her marriage collapse from a distance, while she remained the only person still pretending it was whole. A few days later, Patricia's daughter, Emily, finally came to visit after avoiding her calls for nearly a week. The moment Patricia mentioned Vanessa's name, Emily's face lost all color. "You knew," Patricia said quietly. Emily looked down at her hands. "Mom, I didn't know how to tell you." The words hit harder than Patricia expected. Slowly, Emily admitted she had once seen Richard having dinner with Vanessa months earlier during a work event downtown. They were holding hands, laughing, acting like a real couple. Emily confronted her father afterward, but Richard begged her to stay silent. "He said he was going to end it," Emily whispered through tears. Patricia stepped back like the floor had shifted beneath her feet again. Now even her daughter had been carrying the secret while she continued cooking dinners and folding laundry like a fool. For the first time in her life, Patricia felt completely alone inside her own family. 2 nights later, Richard finally broke. Patricia found him waiting in the living room after midnight, sitting alone with swollen red eyes and an untouched glass of whiskey beside him. The moment she walked in, he stood up too fast and nearly stumbled. "Patty, please listen to me." Tears rolled down his face before she even answered. Then, to her shock, Richard dropped to his knees in front of her. "I made a mistake," he choked out. "I'll end everything. I swear. Don't leave me." Months ago, seeing her husband cry would have shattered Patricia completely. Now she felt almost nothing. No sympathy. No softness. Only exhaustion. She looked down at the man who once controlled her entire emotional world and realized something had changed forever. Richard was terrified of losing her. And Patricia was no longer afraid of losing him. The following afternoon, Patricia placed a stack of divorce papers on the kitchen table between them. No yelling. No dramatic speech. Just quiet finality. Richard stared at the documents as if they were written in another language. "Patty, don't do this. You already did." Her voice stayed calm, which frightened him more than anger ever could. Slowly, Richard picked up the pen, but his hand shook so badly he had to steady it twice before signing his name. 27 years ended in less than 30 seconds. Afterward, Patricia slipped her wedding ring off her finger and placed it gently on the table beside the papers. The small gold band made a soft metallic sound when it touched the wood. Neither of them looked away from it. Felt less like a divorce, and more like a funeral for their marriage. Richard finished signing the final page with trembling fingers, but Patricia still hadn't moved from the other side of the table. The silence between them felt heavy enough to crush the room. He wiped his face roughly and avoided looking at her. "I know you hate me," he whispered, "but I never wanted this to happen." Patricia tilted her head slightly. "That's the problem, Richard," she said softly. "You never thought anything would happen." His breathing slowed. Then Patricia leaned forward just enough for her voice to drop into something almost intimate. "I know you used it." Richard froze instantly. For a second, even the sound of the refrigerator humming in the kitchen seemed to disappear. His eyes lifted toward her with raw confusion first, then fear. "What?" Patricia held his stare without blinking. "The tube in your car," she continued quietly. "I know exactly what happened to it." Color drained from Richard's face so fast it looked unnatural. His lips parted, but no words came out. Suddenly he remembered her standing in the garage that night. The crushed expression on her face. The strange calm afterward. Every detail slammed together inside his mind at once. "Patty," his voice cracked. "What did you do?" Patricia didn't answer directly. Instead, she gave the faintest smile and slowly stood from the table, leaving him trapped alone with the thought growing louder inside his head. Because deep down, Richard already knew the truth, and that realization terrified him more than the physical pain ever had. 3 days after the hospital incident, 2 detectives arrived at Patricia's house asking questions about the lubricant tube. Vanessa had already spoken to the police. According to her statement, Patricia looked too calm at the hospital. Too cold. Too aware. "She did something," Vanessa insisted. "I know she did." Patricia listened quietly from her kitchen chair while one detective flipped through his notes. Outside, rain tapped against the windows again, bringing back memories she wished she could erase. "Did you ever touch the item found in your husband's vehicle?" the detective asked carefully. Patricia met his eyes without hesitation. "I found it, yes." Richard stood near the hallway listening in silence, his face tight with fear. Vanessa wanted answers. The police wanted proof. But nobody had any. Still, the pressure inside the room kept building. Patricia could feel everyone watching her differently now, not as the betrayed wife anymore, but as a woman possibly capable of something dangerous. When the detectives returned the next afternoon, Patricia invited them inside like ordinary guests. She even offered tea. Her voice stayed level, calm enough to make the room uncomfortable. Richard, meanwhile, looked seconds away from collapsing. "Richard, sit down," one detective said. His hands shook violently as he lifted the teacup from the table. The spoon inside rattled against the porcelain with small metallic clicks that filled the silence. Patricia noticed it immediately. So did the detectives. "You seem nervous, sir," one of them observed. Richard swallowed hard. "I'm under a lot of stress." Patricia sat across from him with perfect posture, watching quietly while panic slowly consumed her husband from the inside out. Every time the detectives mentioned the lubricant tube, Richard's breathing changed. Faster. Sharper. Patricia never interrupted once. That frightened him most. Because the calmer she became, the more unstable he felt. The balance of power inside the marriage had completely reversed now. Richard used to control every lie, every secret, every excuse. Not anymore. Now he looked like a guilty man waiting for punishment while Patricia sat in total control of the room. The tension inside the kitchen finally snapped when one detective asked Patricia directly, "Do you believe your wife intended to harm you, Mr. Coleman?" Richard looked at Patricia. Long, hard. Terrified. Everyone waited for his answer. Vanessa had accused Patricia. The police clearly suspected her. Even Patricia herself seemed prepared for whatever came next. But instead of pointing at his wife, Richard slowly lowered his head into his shaking hands. "No," he said hoarsely. The room fell silent. Richard looked up again, eyes wet with shame. "This is my fault. All of it." One detective frowned. "Sir, I lied to my wife for months," Richard cut in. "I cheated on her. I destroyed my family. Patricia didn't do this to me. I did this to myself." Patricia stared at him without speaking. For the first time since the affair exploded, Richard stopped protecting himself. The guilt finally crushed through every excuse he had left. And deep down, he knew he deserved every second of the nightmare he was living. Richard's confession should have calmed Patricia down. Instead, something inside her finally exploded. She laughed once, sharp and broken, before turning toward the living room shelf where their wedding photo still stood in its silver frame. "You want the truth?" she snapped, grabbing the picture with both hands. "I gave you my whole life." Richard flinched as her voice rose louder. "I gave up my career for you. I raised your children. I took care of your sick mother while you chased promotions and slept with some girl young enough to be our daughter." Tears streamed down Patricia's face now, but she didn't stop. "And after everything I sacrificed," her voice cracked violently, "you replaced me because my face got older?" Richard tried stepping toward her. "Patty, please. Don't touch me." Then Patricia hurled the wedding photo across the room. Glass exploded against the wall. The frame crashed onto the hardwood floor while shattered pieces scattered everywhere like fragments of their marriage. Emily covered her mouth in shock from the hallway. Even the detective stood frozen. Patricia pointed at Richard with trembling hands. "You stole my youth," she screamed. "You made me disappear piece by piece while you played husband at home and acted single everywhere else." Richard broke down crying again, but Patricia couldn't stop anymore. Years of humiliation, loneliness, and buried rage poured out all at once. And for the first time in decades, nobody interrupted her. After Patricia's scream faded, Richard slowly collapsed onto the couch like his body could no longer hold itself upright. His shoulders curled inward. His hands covered his face. The confident businessman who once controlled every room now looked small, broken. "I'm sorry," he whispered over and over between uneven sobs. "God, I'm so sorry." But nobody moved to comfort him. Not Patricia. Not Emily. Not even the detectives. Richard's breathing turned ugly and desperate as tears soaked through his fingers. Years of ego, lies, and pride finally shattered in front of everyone watching. He wasn't trying to defend himself anymore. Wasn't blaming Vanessa. Wasn't making excuses. Because there were none left. Patricia stood silently across the room while Richard folded further into himself, almost shrinking under the weight of what he had destroyed. The affair. The humiliation. The family he traded away for excitement that lasted less than a year. And now everyone could see him clearly. Not powerful. Not desirable. Not special. Just a weak old man who destroyed his own life because he wanted to feel young again. Richard started crying harder when he noticed the shattered wedding photo still scattered across the floor. That image finally broke him. Because for the first time he understood something terrifying. Patricia would survive this. But he never would. In the end, the investigation quietly fell apart. The detectives never found fingerprints, recordings, or any proof linking Patricia directly to what happened inside Richard's SUV. Suspicion remained, but suspicion wasn't enough to press charges. Vanessa resigned from the company less than 2 weeks later. People stared when she walked through the office halls. Some whispered. Others openly judged her. Eventually, she disappeared without saying goodbye to anyone. Richard moved into a small apartment across town after the divorce papers were finalized. No family dinners. No warm lights waiting at home. Just silence, pain medication, and the echo of everything he destroyed with his own choices. Patricia watched it all happen from a distance without celebration. No revenge fantasy felt satisfying anymore. Only cold consequences remained. And somehow that made the ending feel even crueler. Weeks after the divorce, the house felt colder than Patricia remembered. Too quiet. Some nights she wandered from room to room unable to sleep, stopping only when she reached the old family photo albums stacked beside the bookshelf. Slowly she opened one. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Beach vacations. Smiling faces frozen in time before everything rotted underneath. Patricia traced her fingers across a younger version of herself standing beside Richard with sunlight in her eyes and hope still alive in her smile. Then she started crying again. Not the violent rage from before. Just silent tears falling one after another in the empty living room. The revenge had destroyed him, but it had destroyed something inside her too. Patricia closed the album and leaned back against the couch, staring into the dark house that no longer felt like a home. Did I win? She whispered to herself. Or did I lose everything? No answer came. Only the sound of rain touching the windows while loneliness slowly settled beside her like a permanent shadow. Late one rainy evening, Patricia's phone vibrated softly beside her on the couch. She almost ignored it until Richard's name appeared across the screen for the first time in weeks. Just one message. I still love you. Patricia stared at the words for a long time without blinking. The room stayed silent except for rain tapping against the windows. Slowly, the screen dimmed until the black glass reflected Richard's old contact photo back at her. Tired eyes, gray hair. A man who suddenly looked far older than she remembered. For a moment, Patricia felt nothing at all. No love. No rage. No victory. Only emptiness. Then, without replying, she pressed one button and blocked his number forever. The screen went dark completely. And somewhere across town, the man who destroyed their marriage was finally left alone with the silence he created himself.